Our next speaker here from Artveoli is founder and CEO Alina Adams. She herself is a serial entrepreneur and has founded tech companies in the hardware and software spaces. She's a faculty member at Northeastern University and a mentor at several global organizations. We're really excited to have you here, Alina. And same thing, we were going to have some Q&A questions directly at the end of your presentation after we learn more about Artveoli. So at this time, I will hand it over to you, and I'm looking forward to chatting after.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here, and thank you, Lindsay, for a very generous introduction. So I'm going to briefly explain who I am, what we are, what we do, and then our CRADA agreement and work with Lawrence Livermore. And majority of the time I'll open for Q&A. Hopefully you have some questions to follow up the presentation. And I'm going to echo some of what Harshal was mentioning, because a lot of the similarities you will hear, especially in the startup world. But I'm a founder and CEO of Artveoli. We are air purification company. We're generating fresh air inside buildings. And exactly what that means is we know people exhale carbon dioxide and they need oxygen to breathe. So we develop systems that actually remove carbon dioxide indoors and produce oxygen, creating that fresh air effect for people in the indoor environment. And why do we need to remove CO2 inside? Well, outside, CO2 has been growing over the last 100 years, and currently it's 416 parts per million, but inside it's typically a lot higher. It's 3 to 4 times, even more higher than that. And the reason is because we breathe out CO2. So we're contributing to that indoor CO2 contamination. And why it's actually bad for us is that CO2 creates, it changes our blood pH, and it creates a lot of different effects that we have. So if you're sitting in the closed conference room or home room, over the period of time, you might notice you're getting tired, or you're getting sleepy, you have headaches. So there's a lot of effects that we have, and brain is the very sensitive organ to CO2 changes. And once the CO2 increases, we actually have loss of productivity and concentration and our performance, work performance. So that's why we designed it and developed, wanted to create this systems that would, anyone could put in their homes and office, and they would remove CO2 locally and bring it to good normal levels, below 600 parts per million, but more importantly, under 1,000 parts per million, because that's what EPA, CDC recommends. And these systems would be, for both commercial and home use, just making it more comfortable environment for people to breathe, and productive as well. So that's kind of an essence of what we're building, what we have been building over the last years. And we're lucky to have Lawrence Livermore as our partner, our collaboration partner, R&D partner in this journey. And we're currently under CRADA agreement funded by DOE. And that gives us the access to facilities, to a lot of resources, equipment, of course, people. They have IP that we're developing, and how we got to this kind of journey is very interesting. I got introduced to one of the team members at Lawrence Livermore just through shared connection. It was one of the investors that introduced us and say, hey, you're working the CO2 removal. There's this lab, they're working on something in the same space. So it's just more of kind of like a word of mouth. And once we got in touch, we thought there might be something interesting, but we didn't know exactly what it was or how would it be. We weren't very active in soliciting any type of partnerships. It was just more of the introduction. And once we had these conversations, more in-depth conversations on the NDA, and see what could we do, then we started to see, well, there is an opportunity. And based where we were, we raised funding. Back then, we had seed funding, but it would require for us significant amount of capital to get into manufacturing. And we had some technological obstacles, how to make it efficient, cheaper, and just to make this a viable commercial product. So it was just kind of like a no-brainer for us to partner with Lawrence Livermore and integrate some of the technologies that they've developed over decades, essentially, that we could leverage to make our systems easier to manufacture, cheaper, and perform better. So we got in this agreement, and the team was wonderful and accommodating, and we negotiated. Our side is not, we're not familiar with grant writing or proposals or anything. So we had a tremendous support from the team to help us out with all this process. And overall, it's a very friendly environment, business-friendly environment, where our partners, they're incentivized for us to succeed. We are their commercialization partner, so they want to create agreements and create the structure and everything that help us. So it's negotiating on the timelines, make sure that aligns with where we are, and all those things. So we're currently finishing up and finalizing our development process and testing so we can get that ready to commercialization. And in that process, we're creating different IP and commercialization plan with our partners. And this is kind of a high level overview, and I'm looking forward to the questions.
Great. Thanks, Alina. I appreciate it. Great presentation. Excited to hear more about you and deep dive a little bit. So I'll kick us off with the first question today. And I saw with your partnership journey and how you came to that. So the first initial was a chance meeting. Were you actively searching for partnerships in that moment, or was that something that just kind of happened organically?
So we weren't actively looking for partnerships. A lot of times you don't know, well, we don't know what is out there, right? So there might be a lot more partnerships that are missing out to just because we're not actively soliciting where we don't know. But, and that takes me to even another point, that there's a lot more opportunities that we could create with new labs. And I've seen now the Harshals being very good at this, creating diverse different partnerships, where we've been a little bit more focused with Lawrence Livermore. But yes, we didn't know, we weren't actively looking. It just came up through the network. And if that person did not introduce us, this would never happen. So this was just the magic of network and people talking and having conversations.
What for you has been the most surprising thing about this partnership process as you've gone through it?
There are a lot of surprises. There's the traditional sort of both preconceptions and myths about working with the government and the timeline scopes. So we have to work with their partner, they're our partner, they're working with us, but we have to be realistic on the timelines, how fast things move, on the budgets and everything. But what's surprising how still, even though it's a set form, it's a contract, the details in the contract, how people work to make things happen, that was actually surprising. There, you could see that people care, and the team, they are the extension. I feel that they're extension of our team. They care and they want to make you successful. So I was surprised in the sense, like, it's not just, we're putting the money, go out, do what I have to do. If it doesn't work out, that's it. No, the team actually cares. And they're working with you. If you need an extension, you can request an extension. If you need additional budget, you might not get it, but you can ask for it. So there's still a lot of flexibilities to accommodate. And now with COVID, we had a lot of delays. So we had to ask for extension because we were just on the shutdown. So that part, I was very surprised, but also thankful for, working with our partners.
So definitely fair to say a team collaborative environment. That's kind of the atmosphere that I'm gaining or guessing from what you're saying.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes, when we have to have hard conversations, we're straightforward, we have hard conversations. If we're going, over budget, it's like, we just need to discuss it. So at least in my experience, I had a very comfortable as extension of the team. They're my team, working with them, getting on the call, whatever time of the day we need to make, to move things forward. And for us, it was finishing the product, building the value, so then we can commercialize that product.
Right, great. And so yesterday we saw Mary Munson present on the lab innovation ecosystem and how to navigate that. And one of the things that she mentioned, and I've heard from startups and entrepreneurs, a common misconception that when you work with the national labs, they own your IP and your IP isn't protected. And it's this common misconception that we see over and over again. But you very distinctly on your slide said that Artveoli has your IP, you take it. So can you walk us through, how you navigated determining what your IP is, what is joint IP as you went through this partnership path?
Sure, absolutely. And again, from our experience, we had a very positive experience. We had a very straightforward conversation, who owns the IP, and all the agreements are discussed, put on the tables. There are different options for licensing and such, but it's very clear. We developed our IP separately. Lawrence Livermore doesn't have any say in that IP. This is ours. At the same time, there's some technologies that have been developed, for years and decades that Lawrence Livermore side that they filed, it's their IP. There's mutual IP that is generated during the collaboration. And it's sometimes it seems like kind of like where's the gray line, but it's actually based on the claims they've written. It's easy to say who developed that IP. So for us, we had a very kind of set of boundaries, like this is the IP that we generated, we created, this is the joint, and that's what's been developed prior to this collaboration. So in that sense, again, communication is the key. Having this communication in terms of IP and what IP can be potentially developed jointly it's a very good conversation to talk about early on. It's one of the reasons why companies go work with government, is to develop new IP that can get exclusive licensing opportunities too, which is also very lucrative. But in general, the office on the technology transfer and IP, they're very helpful. They want to work with you, and there are different options for licensing based on the business and company needs. So if you don't need exclusivity, that's fine. There's different versions of licensing agreements, and they're trying to make it easy for businesses to commercialize the product, and that's the ultimate goal.
Great, and a good goal at that. So last question, one more to conclude our program. And so this is a very broad question, and I'm going to put you on the spot because I think a lot of people want to know this. What's the biggest piece of advice for, there's a lot of industry that are listening here. So what's your advice for those that haven't yet started the process but are about to or considering it? What advice would you give them?
So I think they're kind of two parts. So number one is understanding the needs, technology needs within the organization, the company. So really knowing what do you need to do, where it's potentially something could be improved in terms of improvements, efficiencies, product portfolio expansion, whatever that is. So that's internal. And as external is to understanding what is out there. So internal is working with R&D team, to CTO, like all the technology team. And then at the same time, the external person needs to go out and talk to people. And as simple as, following up with this event, understanding what technology is already available or what opportunities are out there that you could develop new technologies together in addition. And talking to people is the key. And if I didn't have that simple conversation, it was just very casual conversation, we would not have this collaboration. So just even getting on the phone and your Zoom call and saying like, this is what we do, this is our technology needs, and then talking to potential labs and see what opportunities they have internally there, because a lot of times they're more happy than not to create this new R&D projects if they see there's a viable commercialization path.
Great. Well, thank you. That is a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Alina. We appreciate it and are excited to see where Artveoli goes next.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.